welcome to the Bell Midnight. This episode will be talking about the mysterious creature under the bridge of the Isle of Wight, as well as the famous UFO abduction story of the Pascagoula River. I'm your host, Joseph Michaels, joined by John Mack. We'll get right into it.
Under the bridge, huh? We're talking about a troll here. Did he want a toll?
He behaves like a troll.
Oh dear.
But we'll get into that one later. Alright, let's start out with our first story. But before we start out with the first story, there's a bit of context that's needed. So for some reason, in the years of 1973 and 1974, those 2 years was known as invasion years because there was an enormous UFO flap, and it was just this massive increase in UFO activity all around the world. Just tons and tons of sightings. So this is from the year of 1973 in October. Because later in the year 1973, everything really picked up for some reason. We haven't had a huge string of these kinds of UFO sightings or UFO activity. Some people suggest that every 50 years it should pick up. So, 50 years from 73, 2023, 2024, we should get another flap, right?
Wild.
Right down the road, it's going to get nuts.
Sounds good to me.
With that context added, let's get into our story.
Okay.
It's Jackson, Mississippi, 1973, October the 11th. Now, this was down by the Pascagoula River. Two men, 42-year-old at the time, Charles Hickson, and 18-year-old Calvin Parker. They were both down by the riverbank fishing, night fishing, and they were co-workers at the Wagner shipyard there. They're there sat on the bank or the pier, having a nice fish. Now, however, all of a sudden, there was an uncomfortable sound of like a whirring. Hickson would later describe it as a hissing sound. But the two men looked around, eventually locating two flashing blue lights, and they were heading towards them. So within moments, they could make out a huge metallic oval-shaped object overhead. They said the craft was about 40 feet in length and at least 10 feet in height.
Interesting.
So they're being approached by this thing in the middle of the night now. Great.
Yeah, sounds fantastic.
Charles goes on to say that the door opened up and bright light from inside the craft, a beam of light, lit up the whole area. It lit up so much, there was so much light that the two men had to focus to see three robot-like gray humanoid creatures floating down towards them. So they didn't have a ramp or anything, they were just kind of floating through the air down towards them. Robot-like gray humanoid creatures. They go talk about their skin too, which is interesting.
Okay.
Charles says they just glided out the door. Continuing on, as they got closer, Hickson would make out finer details. He would later state they had no neck, so they were bodybuilders.
I've heard that description, no neck, before.
He said they had gray skin, but he said the skin was very coarse and wrinkled like an elephant's. So wrinkled was this strange gray skin that he couldn't make out any eyes.
That's different.
Yeah, it is. But he says he did recall projections where the ears would normally reside.
Yeah.
But he said what was very strange were the hands. They were claw-like in the shape of, claw-like with like mittens, right?
Yeah.
So he said that the creatures grabbed him by the arms, and he instantly felt pain where they touched him. And he also mentioned in an interview that he's about 5'8", his height.
So he's not small.
Yeah, so he said they were a little shorter than he was, so they weren't terribly big. They also grabbed Calvin, but he said that when they went and grabbed Calvin, that Calvin just went limp from, I guess he passed out from fear.
Okay.
Charles is conscious, Calvin's passed out, and he says these three creatures then floated them aboard the craft, like anti-gravity or something. So they get on board the ship, or whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
Charles says when they were taken into the craft, they entered a large round room near the center of it. And he said there was glowing light from everywhere. It was just bright and well lit, but he couldn't quite tell where the light was coming from. Like the floor, the ceiling, everything was just very lit up. He said that he was paralyzed at this point now. He could only move his eyes. Then he said something came out of the wall, like a big pupil with an eye. Like a big eye with a little pupil in it. He said it looked at him.
Like biological or mechanical?
Well, he said it was a machine, but he said it looked like an eye.
Okay.
And he said it looked them all up and down and everything, and then it went back into the wall. But we'll go on to another part of the story about them being inside the craft. Once inside the strange ship, each man was subjected to medical examination of some kind. I couldn't get any
Uh-oh.
details about it, but, I'm sure the book has it, but I didn't get the book.
Yeah.
According to Hickson, Charles Hickson, a football-shaped probe would appear out of the wall and move slowly around his body. This is what he also called that big pupil eye thing.
That probe isn't going somewhere, is it? Because that's a football size. Oh, no.
You'd think they'd know better, but you don't.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, he said he wasn't sure how long the examination took place, but he said that that little probe that looked around was about like 90 seconds.
Okay.
But as for everything else, he said it could have been anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes because of the high strain. Just not, now you're paralyzed, you're on the ship. You're not sure how much time is really passing.
Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, one particular detail. The thing about there being light everywhere in the room without a visible source is this is a detail that will regularly come up in alien abduction cases.
I was just going to say in an examination setting up, it kind of makes sense to have, even if it was panels that the room consisted of, to have each panel independently light up so you wouldn't have you wouldn't have too many shadows cast in the course of your examination. Like everything would be lit properly.
Yeah, because if you're going to do a medical exam, you want it to be well lit.
Yeah.
See, aliens know this stuff.
Well, the problem is they have the technology to theoretically traverse space. Why did they need lights?
What do you mean? They love light.
I'm just saying, like, I don't know. It just seems like things just like to terrorize people.
They didn't just pick up two men against their will in the middle of the night.
Oh, okay. So this is all above board. So you got to understand, this is above board. This is all for science.
This is above board. Following the examination, he suddenly found himself back on the pier. Calvin Parker was there on the pier as well with him. Charles said that Calvin Parker looked like he was in some sort of a trance, as if he was about to go into shock, with his arms stretched out in front of him and his gaze just straight forward.
Mm-hmm.
So Charles tried to get up and tried to help him. Once he kind of got him to come out of his trance, the men quickly left the pier and went and sat in their car, not knowing what to do or what the hell just happened, right?
Like, what do? You see a doctor, you call the police, you don't tell anybody because they're going to call you crazy. Like, well, what's step 2 in this,
Yeah. Who do you call? You don't call the Ghostbusters. Even the Ghostbusters would tell you it's not our thing. We don't do aliens.
Yeah, we don't do that.
Yeah, we don't do that. Anyway, so they're both sitting in the car for a little bit trying to figure out what do we do. So they ultimately decide to report the incident. So they initially called Keesler Air Force Base, who informed them they didn't handle that sort of thing. Take it to your local sheriff. Now, the Air Force doesn't handle alien abductions. That's the Pentagon's job. You should have called the Pentagon.
That could go in a lot of directions right there.
Should have called the CIA.
Yeah, well, yeah, they love abductions, those guys.
We'll abduct you next.
Could you have been in Guantanamo?
Yeah. Oh, that was our guys. Don't worry about it. They're doing a thing.
It was you were asleep. It's always some stupid explanation.
All right, so here's the thing. So they called the local sheriff.
Yeah.
Awesome. Did I get his name? I did.
Oh, you got the 5-0's name. We're responded.
Got the 5-0, baby. So they called the sheriff. Once at the Jackson County Police Station, obviously the police didn't believe the story at first. They thought they're dealing with druggies again, right? Now keep in mind, this area isn't like, a high crime rate area.
Yeah, it sounds pretty rural.
Yeah, so they don't believe the story. So police did talk to him and they interrogated him and they got their stories and they wrote everything down. They did all reporting good and proper.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They're like, we're going to catch them good. We're going to catch them in a lie.
Okay.
The investigators say, okay, no problem. We're going to go talk about it and we'll be back. But unbeknownst to Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, the investigators left a hidden tape recorder in the room to record them, which now is obviously common practice to have cameras and microphones in your room at all times.
Yeah.
So Glenn Ryder, the man who questioned the two men, here's what he said about it. We left them to talk to see if they were going to say something along the lines of, well, we got them fooled, but they didn't. They were really concerned. The two men did talk, but their conversation only served to strengthen their claim. For example, at one point, Charles Hickson is heard saying to Parker, "It scared me to death too, son. You can't get over it in a lifetime." Glenn Ryder would continue and would also recall how the longer he watched the two men, the more evident their genuine fear was, and that they were really shaken up.
That is interesting.
We'll post a link to the secret tape recording below. The audio's pretty trash, but if you want to listen to it, it's available.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. I actually want to end up listening to that. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just a bunch of really good liars who just assume the police are going to record them. But I don't know. It's
We'll get into if they're lying or not.
okay. I'm down.
All right, so at this point in the story, they lying?
I don't know. I hesitate to call people liars.
Okay.
Well, I hesitate to call people in certain situations liars. Right now it doesn't seem like they have much to gain. Most of the time when a lie is involved, it means there's personal gain.
Okay, we'll continue.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, they didn't get any personal gain from this.
What about the book? Did that end up paying them?
It was someone else's book, wasn't his.
Oh, okay. So they got nothing except for ridicule.
They actually got a lot of support, honestly. Charles said he didn't get a lot of ridicule. He actually ended up getting kind of a lot of positive messages.
Well, the funny thing about small towns is a lot of people who live in urban areas don't realize that a lot of people who live in the rural areas see a lot of weird shit like this.
Hmm.
It happens more frequently than you think. Not at this level, but I don't know. That could really go either way.
You know, there was some fallout. Like, it was hard to get a job because of the attention, so sometimes they had to take jobs out of state, so no one knew who they were.
Yeah, that's to be expected.
But other than that, they weren't ever ridiculed, like, as some sort of clown. Like, they were usually, like, just left alone.
Yeah. I was just going to say it's, and that's the difference between rural and urban. If you were some other thing that was here, and I'm not necessarily saying I believe that, but if you were, would you be, tearing ass all over the countryside in your spaceship, or would you be tearing ass through New York City? Like, one of those is obviously a really bad decision. Well, they're probably both really bad decisions, but one's worse than the other.
Yeah, if you want to lay low and not be seen, don't go through London.
Yeah, you're gonna pick up some guy who's fishing in a river somewhere in some rural area where an academic or authority figure is gonna think he's just full of crap or he's got too many beers in him. You're not gonna go mess with somebody. You're not gonna pull somebody out of, like, I don't know, Central Park, like, in front of all the people who are no doubt going to see it, and it's just not gonna happen. It's a crime of opportunity. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So after their time in the police station, they get taken to the hospital to get checked out.
Mhm.
All right, yeah, so Hickson claims both that he and Parker had made requests for the incident to remain quiet, but the following day, state newspapers ran the story on their front pages immediately.
Yeah, naturally.
So they said within days, Jackson, Mississippi was the focus of UFO enthusiasts from all over the world. Reporters would congregate around the Wagner shipyard premises, seeking to speak with the two men and calling the shipyard, calling Charles's home, all wanting to get interviews and everything. But we'll back up to a little bit. After they left the police station, they were taken to the hospital. There was a testimony from Tommy Crawford, who worked in the radiology department. And he said that Charles and Calvin came in very early in the morning to the ER, and the radiology department is right next to the ER. And he said some of the nurses and the other staff came in and said, yeah, there's two guys here that said they got abducted by aliens, and we have to look at them. And he didn't believe him. He's like, oh, okay, here we go. We got two maniacs in here.
He probably figures he's going to walk into some meth heads or something.
Exactly. So he decides to go out and have a little bit of a look. So he goes and he meets Charles and Calvin, and he notices they seem a little shaken up. It turns out that a local TV news station reporter showed up that Tommy happened to kind of know, like they were an acquaintance of some sort. So he got to go kind of like hang out while the TV station was interviewing Charles about the incident. And here's the interesting thing. Tommy says, over all the years, and he said this 10 years later as well, he says, over all the years, he never heard Charles change his story. The story was always exactly the same as when he first reported it that night. And he says, upon talking to Calvin, he said Calvin seemed really scared, like he was shaken up bad.
Well, Calvin was the guy who straight up passed out, right?
Yeah. Doctor that looked at them, doctor said they were fine. The doctor, he's just impartial. He's like, I don't know what happened.
He probably wants no part of it.
Yeah. Now here's the next thing about that night. So there were incidentally several other UFO sightings on that evening. Most described what they believed to be a helicopter-like object with blue lights. So you remember back in the start, they said it had 2 flashing blue lights on it.
This is all the same night. Was it within the same region?
Yeah, in that area, yeah. Because it was the same police station, that same local police station got a whole wave of UFO reports. Now, the thing is, some of them were hoaxes, but others are unexplained.
Well, how is it determined a hoax as well?
Probably because a zealous little group deemed them to be hoaxes. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you can call it a hoax if like everybody's in on something, but if it's first of all, either they're all hoaxes or they're not. You know what I mean? The odds of someone calling in about a UFO sighting with the same description and it not being a hoax versus the odds of the odds of someone calling in with the same UFO description and it being a hoax, while other ones can also be considered not hoaxes, is ridiculous. Because just looking at the 365 days of the year, it just so happens that someone decides independently to hoax on that night is unlikely.
Oh,
If it is a hoax, then all of them would be hoaxes.
well, here's the thing. Maybe the men in black called them in. These obvious hoaxes were called in by a government agency or the men in black. So that way, upon investigation, you go, oh, it's obviously a hoax. They must all be hoaxes.
That's like when the FBI used to infiltrate the civil rights movement and they used to have a couple of people in there who would start trouble and bring weapons. And then, that would give them the reason to crack down on it. A hoax. They have a long history of doing that kind of stuff.
Interesting.
It is interesting. Okay. You maybe see a different perspective. Thank you. I hadn't considered that.
But, I mean, it's just a fun thing there. But,
Oh, yeah.
all right, so Parker wasn't happy about the publicity of it. He really didn't like the publicity because afterwards, you could say he had PTSD from that whole thing. He was having like panic attacks, like nervous breakdowns, and he didn't like being bothered about it because he just didn't want to talk about that experience.
Was he ever hospitalized at all?
He said that he did have to go to the hospital from time to time.
Okay. So basically, he had to go to the hospital and they'd send him up to the top floor.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But he would try to avoid the media, and there was one particular time that Calvin mentioned in an interview that he really didn't like the press. And one time, a press reporter tried to get in his face with a camera, and he goes, "I don't want to talk about it right now. Now's not a good time." But the guy wouldn't leave, so he took his camera and just threw it on the ground and ripped all the film out of it. Get out of here, kid!
Well, at least something good came from it.
Yeah. Right, so Parker didn't like the media. However, Charles, on the other hand, he's not a big fan of the media either, but he would say that the reason he did talk about it whenever he was asked, and he would do interviews whenever they wanted him to, is he only wanted to let everybody know we are not alone. He didn't care whether you believed him or not. He just wanted to get the story out, put his experience out there, and what you took from it, whatever.
Okay. Fair enough.
And his family supports him in that decision as well. They all say, yeah, we think he did the right thing by sharing it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't help but agree with the guy. Tell the truth about something. It's the only way we get information. So if that's really what he's doing, then great.
And that's one of the things he said in an interview was he didn't get a lot of ridicule. He actually ended up getting a lot of support. And he said he thinks that's because he was just being honest.
Yeah.
He got a lot of support from even the strangest of places. Even churches were sending him flyers and stuff saying that they heard a story, they were praying for him, they thank him for sharing.
That's odd.
Yeah, everybody.
Usually, and at least traditionally, churches would be the first to deny the existence of any kind of extraterrestrial because, well, the excuse was that other people use when talking about the church. I've never heard the church. It's never been my impression, but everyone else always says, who's not related with the church, that it threatens the church's position about humans being the only ones of the favorite or anything else. I haven't seen anything like that in the past 100 years, but that's what people say. Like the old days, the sun revolves around the earth rather than the earth revolving around the sun. The earth is the center of the universe kind of stuff.
So they get out of the hospital, and here's what happens. So the story hits the headlines and it blows up. So the story attracts numerous hypnotists and other experts to come and test the men. to either prove or debunk their claims. So Dr. James Harder, who was a professor of engineering and a UFO investigator from was it Berkeley, California? I don't quite remember. But he flew out to Jackson, Mississippi in 36 hours to go talk to Charles.
That's a lot of get up and go.
Oh, he had some get up and go, but it wasn't just him. There was a bunch of other doctors that came. Dr. Hynek, Dr. Bridges, and Dr. Bosco.
Hynek. I'm not surprised to hear that name in there.
Yeah. But all of them were present when they placed Charles under hypnosis in an attempt to try and get further information about what happened that night. After the sessions were over, all the doctors concluded that Charles was telling the truth as he knew it, which is odd because normally they normally, you know, today a doctor would be like, oh, well, he hallucinated. He, something.
Yeah, it's swamp gas.
But for the doctors to rush out there in an attempt to confirm or debunk, most likely probably wanting to debunk, they came away saying, yeah, he's telling the truth.
In fairness, it depends on the doctors, but nevertheless, yeah, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even for the ones that want to believe this kind of stuff, they're usually, if you've ever looked at the data of how many of these things they respond to, they, for the large part, dismiss most of them outright. Even the people who are really trying to get something, they try very hard to filter the nonsense out because they know, you know, suppose like one of these guys puts something out there, goes, oh yeah, I hypnotized this guy, and then later on somebody says, yeah, or it's found out that it was a completely and totally a hoax. Well, I mean, like that's a hit against them, so they're real careful about that kind of stuff. More careful than you would think. You would think they'd be zealots for looking for aliens anywhere they possibly can.
Yeah.
But most of them are actually pretty critical.
But yeah, one of the things that Charles said was he believes these aliens are making preparations to contact the government, which, I don't know, did they? That's just his opinion. That's just a throw-off statement that he had. The thing is, he doesn't know. Like, and he said that he doesn't know who they are, where they are, what they're doing, but they are something out of this world that are doing something, and we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And that's all you can really take away from all these UFO encounters, right? So that is the story of the Pascagoula River Abduction.
What are your thoughts on it?
Oh, it's 100% real. 100% real.
You think so?
Well, Charles passed away in 2011, and he never, ever changed the story.
Okay. And it affected him. It was somewhat detrimental to him. There was really no benefit, at least.
Yeah, there was no benefit.
If not a detriment, there was no gain. Okay.
If you were going to go through all that trouble, he did not benefit for all that trouble.
Yeah, so there was no cash in.
Especially Calvin Parker. Like, Calvin Parker really didn't want any attention, and he would just kind of like disappear for spats, just doing stuff out of state, because he didn't want anyone to recognize him.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. You want to do a hoax, then after you do it, you're like, nah, well, I guess if you regretted it, be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that shit. I better get out of state.
True.
But I don't know what to tell you. Is it real? Is it fake?
I don't know either. I mean,
because everyone involved is all saying these guys were legit shaken up. They were terrified. And the wife of Charles even said he was affected by it. Like, he would wake up with like cold sweats in the middle of the night, having nightmares. She said that after that encounter, he was a different man.
That's interesting. It's difficult, but I always err on the side of giving the benefit of the doubt and these sorts of things. We need to be careful about who we outright doubt, even if it's a fantastic story, because God forbid something fantastic ever happen. You know what I mean?
Right. It makes the world less mundane, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly more interesting. I would rather have this thing being a puzzle, although maybe that's our own self-interest talking. You know what I mean? I mean, but ultimately, who cares, really? Not who cares about the story. It's very interesting, so we care. But, you know, if we're fooling, there's no way to figure out if you're fooling yourself or if you're not, or there's no answer. I did want to comment on before you said that if there was supposition that if the aliens were here, they were trying to make contact with the government. I think that if there was such a thing as aliens visiting the planet, I think making contact with the government would be near the top of their list of priorities. All you need to do is get discovered, and suddenly you have hostile, what will only be considered hostile ships because you haven't talked to them, flying around doing stuff. Shit's going to get real, and it's going to get real fast. And it's probably going to get real in big and nasty ways. Like the last thing you want is like some military going bonkers and start launching shit. I'm not talking about nukes, but just like launching missiles or mobilizing troops or just making things difficult.
Yeah. Even if it's ineffective, it will still be difficult to, move around and do what you want to do without being constantly harassed.
Even if it's ineffective, even if they can't even constantly harass, suppose they could, snap their fingers and disable everything so they couldn't be chased around, so you couldn't intervene. It doesn't matter. You just shined a spotlight on something that they obviously, if it is true, want to keep secret, else they wouldn't do it in the dead of night and they wouldn't kidnap people like hoodlums. In the event that it's true, I could almost guarantee that something like that would be in contact. And let's be honest, when it comes to the government, all you need is a good bribe.
Yeah, there is a story floating around. I forget where it comes from, that aliens did make contact with the government and did make a deal that they are allowed to abduct X amount of people a year.
I had heard that on a few occasions as well. There's more than one account that says something to that respect. It's so difficult to tell with all the misinformation. Like you said, the hoaxes, and not necessarily hoaxes by the people, but the hoaxes by the government. And it's not like the whole subject of UFOs hasn't been used by the government before to steer people's attention away from other things going on.
Yes.
But it's a wonderful misdirection.
Yeah, there was there was one good story about the government using the idea of UFOs to get certain people off their backs about certain secret projects. So like, oh yeah, the government even played them. They were like, oh yeah, it's probably UFOs. You're talking to UFOs.
Yeah.
And then it turns out he wasn't talking to UFOs. He was just tapping into another secret project that was being worked on, because the guy was a scientist that worked on top secret projects for the Air Force.
I think I remember you mentioning this. Yeah. They actually had a guy posing as his friend.
Yeah, the one colonel there. And he accidentally tapped into other top secret projects that were taking place. So instead of them saying, hey, you're not the only top secret project here, stop that. No, they just kept playing it like they were aliens. Like, oh yeah, it's aliens, keep investigating. And they kept playing him and playing him and playing him until the guy went crazy.
Yeah.
And then eventually, I think it was the colonel that felt so bad about it, that when this guy was on his deathbed, he went to him and said, it was all fake. We made it all up. We were just trying to get you away from these other guys.
Yeah.
And even the guy on his deathbed was like, no, it was all real. It was aliens. That's how bad they fucked with him.
It's kind of brutal. That's the biggest problem with everything. Like, if there ever was any kind of contact, you just wouldn't know who to trust. It's an interesting story, though. There has to be some merit in some form. Well, there doesn't have to be, but I think that it sounds like there's some merit to at least some of it. They could be filthy liars and just really good at it. That's entirely possible. I'm not going to say, like some others would say, that it's the most likely. I refuse to do that to people. I'm not going to do that to people.
It's interesting because they passed lie detector tests. They went through the hypnosis sessions. Never broke. Always on point. Never changed their story. And sometimes people that are hoaxing, they always change their story. Every time it keeps changing. I forget who it was. I don't remember the name, but he was outed as a hoaxer. And if you look back through his timeline of him telling the story, it changed dramatically every time he told the story. It was ridiculous. Like, the same premise was still there, the same structure.
Yeah.
But details constantly were changing.
Yeah, a lot of that's human memory fallibility too. It's like it's difficult. Well, the tangled web saying, it's difficult to remember all the shit you've said. It's so much shit, especially if you're interviewed for a couple hours. Like, Jesus, I can't remember what I ate for dinner last night.
Yeah, I know what I ate. I had cigarettes for dinner.
Cigarettes for dinner and sadness and regret for dessert.
I'm so full from cigarettes. Yum.
All right, time for our second story.
Ooh.
Which is a little less serious, but it happened.
Yeah, this definitely happened. It's been proven by science and things.
But before we get into the story, this story did remind me of something. It reminded me of All Colors Sam.
What is that?
You know who that is?
No.
It's a fucking demon.
Is this like people calling this demon kind of summon thing, or some Ouija board story or something?
All Colors Sam is some sort of a demon that masquerades as a fucking weird clown or something.
Oh, that's what I need in my life is demonic clowns. Yeah, thanks for that.
He's like in a rainbow outfit, and he speaks with a robotic voice, like it's coming through a bad speaker or something.
Does it sound like Microsoft Sam?
Hello, I'm here.
Barracuda.
I'll change the pitch. I'll change the pitch in post. Yeah, go ahead. Say your tequila. I'll change the pitch in post.
Barracuda.
How about your tequila?
Tequila. You remember that fucking, what was it, a YTMMD or something with that Barracuda? Is it like one of those YouTube videos where they post Reddit threads read by the mechanical voice? Does it sound like that?
No, just like mechanical. Like didn't sound like a text to speech. It just sounded like it was being made by a machine.
Apparently not a very good one.
And you know what's funny? Because that ties into your 411 stuff that you do, is there's been cases of some people who have heard mechanical voices in the woods.
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't get really into our personal views of this show, but yeah, I'm not surprised. Considering the range of, well, considering the bag of tricks the characters in these stories usually have. So,
Oh god, I better go save that audio clip before I forget. The one from the 411 movie where Bigfoot goes ape shit and starts screaming in Japanese.
Bigfoot, he's mad you soiled his kimono.
Yeah, he follows the Bushido code 100% of the time.
Bigfoot doesn't fuck around, boy. He's a warrior. He's definitely not a mercenary, a murderer, and a rapist.
Yeah.
He had great honor. We need that stock Japanese noise. The one that goes, ooh.
You can dig it up. I gotta get the soundboard running.
Yeah, we need a soundboard. We need a soundboard bad.
Anyway, our second story.
All right, second story.
So we move on to our second story, which took place on the Isle of Wight, which is south of England. On the there's a town on the Isle of Wight.
Very familiar name.
Sandown on the Isle of Wight.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little island south of England.
Yeah.
So this is from a report in the Bufora Journal.
Oh.
Which is like a UFO journal of some sort.
Okay. That's why it sounds a little weird in its name.
Yeah, volume 6, number 5. Thanks. Here's the incident over the Isle of Wight would take place in the late afternoon. So this happened in the late afternoon, 15th of May. Guess what year? 1973.
Okay.
So here we are. In the town of Sandown, 7-year-old Faye was playing with a friend when suddenly they heard a siren-like sound ringing out, startling both of them. So they look around to see where's the sound coming from. So then they make their way over to a hedge that they had to push their way through. As they did so, a swampy meadow awaited them.
Spooky.
As they did so, this swampy meadow was out in front of them. And at the same time, this noise stopped. Just stops. They venture into the swampy environment, and as they make their way along a little footbridge, I guess was there, a strange figure became visible underneath. So underneath the bridge, a little figure is visible. So the two children stop in shock and look at this strange creature. Approximately, he's 7 feet tall, and he moved with a strange hopping motion with his knees raised high. And then he made his way over to a little metallic hut with no windows.
Metallic, okay. Like an upside down pot? I mean,
it just says metallic hut with no windows. That's how they described it. So I picture like a little metal like shed.
Yeah, like a shack, like that corrugated steel or whatever, corrugated metal.
He got it from the Home Depot.
Okay. Yeah, well, don't we all?
Yeah.
Wait, do they have Home Depot in the UK?
Maybe now.
I don't know.
The creature seemingly wore a strange hat as well as a tight-fitting tunic. Furthermore, its face, a strange deathly white, had triangular markings for its eyes, as well as a brown square for a nose and motionless lips. Now that's weird.
So this is like an MS Paint version of a bridge troll?
Exactly. So what? It had triangular markings for eyes, so it just had like a round head with just its face painted on.
It almost feels like some kind of dummy that's being used for voice acting that you can look at. It's just they paint some cheap shit on there so you have something that you can stare at while you're delivering your line.
Baby's first alien invasion.
Yeah, baby's
I love the hopping motion, just hopping around on there.
Can I ask you a question? We were all kids once, and we spent a lot of time just wandering and stuff like that. At this point, when you're a kid, you nope the fuck out.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, fuck this shit. I'm out of here.
Oh, my God, yeah.
And you run. Dude, someone sneezes and it was time to run when you're a kid. You remember when someone got hurt? Everybody just ran, even if there was no reason to. They just took off in separate directions. It was like watching shrapnel come out of a grenade. Or boom, into the woods. Everyone's gone.
I remember sometimes we'd be so on edge that sometimes a member of our group would just start to imply, oh, I think we're being followed. I think someone's watching us. And we would all just start like scurrying around and like taking off.
Yeah, it was like, oh, get out of here. Like, you weren't anywhere you weren't supposed to be. It was just that urge to run. So who are these kids who are hanging around on a goddamn bridge and see creepy MS Paint guy, hopping around in the bog, going in his little metal shed? Like, stick around and have a look.
They do more than stick around to have a look.
This probably gets pretty reasonable as it goes on, right?
Yes, as this goes on, it gets far more reasonable.
Okay, gotcha.
After entering the craft, the creature suddenly emerged again in its 3-fingered hand, a Ninja Turtle.
Okay, Ninja Turtles.
It was holding a strange box, and they said it was using it as if it was some sort of a microphone. So he turned to the children, waved, and spoke into the box, asking the children if they were still there.
Wait, aren't they standing in front of it?
Well, I guess they're on the footbridge.
Those MS Paint eyes can't see because they're made in MS Paint.
Yeah, he clearly doesn't have eyes, so he comes out, he asks them if they're still there, and he says, "You know who I am." Okay, so that's odd.
Yeah, no?
Yeah, you know me. What is interesting about this is the development that the notion of this box is some sort of a translation device. This is what some people theorize, that the box is his translator.
It seems to be where this is going.
Now, this is already really strange. Encounter gets even more bizarre when the creature begins a dialogue with the children. He starts speaking to them, and the children in turn ask several questions of their own, one of which was whether he was a man. To the creature replied, no. Okay. So in response, the children asked if he was a ghost. To this, the creature would reply that he wasn't a ghost, but I am in an odd sort of way. With his mechanical voice, I'm sure.
Yeah, a very odd sort of way.
So the children continued to persist, trying to figure out if this guy's not a man or a ghost, then, what are you? So the creature simply replied, you know, and wouldn't elaborate.
Don't you just want to slap this motherfucker?
He sounds like a real a-hole.
Yeah, he's an asshole.
Then, having assured themselves that the creature was indeed friendly, the two children followed the figure into the metallic hut. They said inside the metallic hut, it had 2 floors inside, with the lower floor containing lots of dials and with wooden furniture. The upper floor, meanwhile, had a metal floor and had much less space to move around in, because, that's where he kept the dead.
The dead.
Well, that's not part of the story.
I was going to say, at least they've confirmed before they saw the dead that he was indeed nice.
He's a nice guy.
He's a friendly savage.
So it continues on. Perhaps even more intriguing, the creature would state that he lived on berries that he would pick. Furthermore, he would collect river water after he cleaned it. So he's living on berries and river water, living under a bridge in a metallic hut.
It sounds like a hobo.
So the children would claim to speak with the strange creature for around 30 minutes, carrying on a lovely conversation in his metallic hut.
Did they specify what subjects they touched on? Like, was he talking to them about politics, finance, toys, candy?
Yeah, probably just talk about toys.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay.
So they conversed with him for around 30 minutes, and they left and ran back across the fields. So they ran on home, and they were eager to tell their parents and everyone about the strange man they had met earlier, even though he said he wasn't a man or a ghost, but he was in some sort of strange way. Needless to say, no one believed them.
Mom, Dad, I met a man under a bridge, and he took me into his house. That doesn't need a follow-up.
You think they go, wait, you met someone out there under that footbridge? Hey, I better go have a look.
Yeah, he took you into his house?
Yeah, but that's why I brought up why it reminds me of All Colors Sam, because he did the same thing. He met a bunch of children, he talked to them for a while, I forget exactly what they talked about, but they were asking him who he was and stuff. And he spoke with them for a while with his weird metallic voice. He said after All Colors Sam left and went about his way and the children went about their way, They said only then after they had broken contact with him, they were all struck with terrible fear. Like, oh my God, what the hell just happened? What were we talking to? But at the time of the conversations, they were very calm.
It's similar to like people say they've been abducted. It's so weird. You know what I think that old college Sam guy needs? I think he needs to meet some of the boys from the neighborhood. I think maybe they're gonna have to teach him that he needs to move real quick. Hey, how about you go on and get out of here, Sam? Something may happen to your knees here. Don't be talking to kids no more.
But given that story was so short, I'll give you one more.
Okay, yeah. Oh, is this one even better? Because let's just go for the gold here.
This one's about the Men in Black.
Oh, they're always fun, actually.
Oh, yeah. We're still talking about 1973. This had to do with something called a beanpot UFO case, is what they called it, but...
Okay. Is that code for something? Like,
I guess the guy involved in the story took a photograph of a UFO in 1967. But in April of 1973, the main witness, Reed Thompson, experienced a strange event. Reed was working in his auto repair store, and he said two extremely strange men arrive. Each was very disturbing in their appearance. Each of them had long hair and were wearing tan jumpsuits and very heavy-duty gloves. And he said furthermore, when they spoke, they would speak in a mechanical, monotone voice.
So inflection was something they didn't really understand.
Yes. Thompson said this was very concerning, that these two strangers also knew all the details of the UFO he had witnessed, right down to the date and the fact that he had captured a photograph of the scene.
Interject with a quick question. Had he told anybody about this?
I don't know.
Okay. Because it'd be way creepier if he like never made any kind of official report and two people show up talking about the thing that he never told anybody.
Yeah, I don't know if he told anyone or not. But from the story's perspective, it's plain as if he didn't.
Okay.
Right?
I'll take that.
Right. So these two figures show up and now they have all this information. All right. So now these two strange figures are now demanding the photograph and the negative. They want the evidence. So meanwhile, while he's dealing with these two weirdos, another employee, whose name is Kraft, he went outside to see if there was any more people waiting around outside. So what he witnessed was even stranger than just more of them. Outside was a beautiful, bright yellow 1969 Buick LeSabre.
LeSabre.
What did you just say?
LeSabre. LeSabre.
Look, Vice Grip Garage pronounces it LeSabre.
This is my 1968 Buick LeSabre.
Well, Vice Grip Garage is fucking wrong. How do you like that?
What did you just say?
Vice Grip Garage is awesome.
Well, I'm sure they are awesome, but I'm sure they also like to be special.
You
and
like LeSabre.
LeSabre that hurts me. That hurts me. Jesus Christ.
So this beautiful Buick LeSabre with dark glass, that's nice tinted windows. So when he looked inside, the situation takes a strange turn because inside the vehicle, it's almost completely empty. Kraft goes on to say there was no steering wheels or seats in the car.
Okay.
So before he could get any more detail about what was going on inside that weird car, the men came outside. And as Kraft backed away from the car, his elbow touched one of theirs. When they touched, he said a strange feeling seemed to enter his body.
Ooh.
So he touches them. He says a strange feeling enters his body. And here's the weird thing. 2 years later, Kraft suddenly passes away from nothing. Just suddenly died 2 years later. And according to reports and 2 autopsies that were performed, trying to figure out why this guy died, the autopsies were completely inconclusive. The original guy, Reed, would go on to have several other encounters with these apparent men in black or tan suits. Tan jumpsuits. Is that what they were wearing? Tan over coveralls?
Maybe they were from like, I don't know, some kind of prison for contractors or something.
You know what? I know why they were wearing the tan. Here.
Why?
Let me get the exact wording of how they said it. Yes, tan jumpsuits and very heavy gloves. I know why. Well, because Reed worked at an auto body repair shop, so they thought we'll blend in if we dress like the mechanics. So we'll wear coveralls and heavy duty gloves, and no one will know we're from out of this world.
Legit question: were these actually men in black, or was it just trash guys picking up his garbage?
Well, okay, they wanted the pictures.
Oh, maybe, I don't know. They're just checking to see if he really wanted to throw something. I don't know.
Yeah. So Reed continues on that he had several other encounters with the Men in Black. He said one particular time while driving to work, a strange car appeared out of nowhere and only inches from his bumper. And he said that this car continued to follow him until he arrived at work. And when he got out of the vehicle, he said he was blinded by what seemed like a blue arc welding flash, which temporarily blinded him for a moment. And once he could see again, the car was gone.
It serves no purpose.
They're just harassing him. It's like stalking.
They're just dicks, man. Everything I've ever seen about guys in the Men in Black is they're just dicks.
But what's weird is sometimes you hear stories about UFO researchers like getting way too into the phenomena.
Yeah.
And it consumes them and it almost destroys their life. But the Men in Black come around, tell them, hey, stop looking into this stuff. It's not good for you. And then if they take their warnings, which they usually do, their lives turn around. They get better because they're not obsessed with all this weird stuff.
Well, and that's largely where the idea of them being some kind of protective force comes in. But I mean, like, you have to subscribe to a certain belief in what's going on to take it that way. But yeah, I've definitely heard that on more than one occasion.
But another interesting thing is they always show up in these old-timey Cadillacs or Lincolns.
Oh yeah, like they just rolled off the assembly line.
But I guess since that became mainstream now they changed to Volkswagens according to what's going on.
Ugh, what a downgrade.
I know. And they should have kept that Buick LeSabre.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But yeah, that's it. There's a giant treasure trove of stuff from 1973 and 1974 when it comes to Men in Black and UFO. Yeah,
a lot of hot years there. It's almost like the same as it was like in the 50s. The 50s just had tons of that stuff going on. I mean, a lot of it's interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about Bridge Goblin.
You don't like Bridge Goblin? He never gave a name.
No, he didn't. If you got something that's trying to mess with you, generally speaking, it wants credit for it.
But names have power as well.
That's true. But it doesn't mean he has to use a real one. Like, how many stories have you heard about things that are tormenting people or harassing people, and they just, yes, the name is bullshit. Unless you find a way to actually compel a real name, they'll just tell you whatever they want to say. Like, but how many, people think that they're talking to their dead relatives or like they see them or something like that. They'd love.
They're happy to assume a personality or identity if it benefits them.
Well, it compartmentalizes it and makes it palatable what's happening to them. And, in the personal cases I've seen over the years, the people that are picked on are always in vulnerable positions. So like it's an easy free source of yum-yums. Like, if you're looking for a battery, there's no better battery of you wouldn't find a better place to get energy off of someone who's going through like a monster load of garbage in their life. Like they got to be generating some serious voltage. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's actually a really good movie that talks about people's fear being used as energy for the battery, basically. I believe the movie was Monsters, Inc. for Pixar.
That was a documentary. That was a documentary. Are you dragging my Monsters Inc. into this and trying to say that wasn't a true story?
Well, as true as it gets, ain't it?
Yeah, really. It's like, yeah. Well, that's an interesting collection of things. I'm inclined to give the guys who are fishing the benefit of the doubt. I'm not so inclined to believe the rest of it.
So, okay, so the metallic hut is a bust. And in the repair shop, the two guys in tan suits?
I mean, it has all the hallmarks, but it's just kind of a little too bland, a little too perfect. There's no...
The thing is, if you think Bigfoot's a moron, the Men in Black are beyond morons.
I suppose so.
When you look at some of their behavior in some other cases, they are completely crazy.
Yeah, like sitting down and asking for like 20 glasses of water. Like, if your job was to try to like talk to people and make them believe this or make them believe that, wouldn't you be better at, I don't know, I'd take an acting class or something? I don't know.
I believe I heard one story about a Men in Black was following a person, came into the restaurant with a mustache. They said he had a very nice trimmed mustache. But when he sat down at the table, he ordered some soup, but then his mustache fell off into the soup and he got up in a panic and left.
The old mustache soup.
He's going back to training after that one.
Yeah, they kind of seem like buffoons.
It's like they don't know how to act as people. It's like they're trying to pretend they're people, but they're bad at it.
Yeah, they're really bad at it. And I guess you can kind of understand that. Can you imagine if you didn't have emotions or you didn't think like a person and then trying to act like a person? It'd be so incredibly awkward. The Men in Black stuff is creepy, and I've heard some things that have more validity to them than others. But I don't know. It's just something. It's this particular story. Like I don't know. It was
So you like the first one. The fishing one seemed pretty legit, especially with all the experts poking around at it. And he never changed the story.
yeah. I like also he didn't benefit from it. Like he didn't go straight into like writing a book.
Yeah, he was not on tour. He did not have a website and a newsletter that cost $11 a month.
Yeah, like there was none of that stuff.
So, all right, Metallic Cut guy, not so much. And Men in Black,
Yeah, the Men in Black is just it's whatever.
yeah.
I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna say it's impossible. Just to say,
But they had that hot Buick LeSabre.
oh God, I'm gonna find you.
Any more closing thoughts or no?
Yeah, just one thing to add. It's a Buick LeSabre. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's all. All right, so what you have coming up? You were saying you had something about decapitations in the woods with doubloons.
Oh, yeah. Well, not exactly doubloons, but it involves gold. And as far as I understand, gold is used in the construction of doubloons. So we're just going straight to doubloons.
All right.
It is a story about a couple of guys who are in Washington State back in the 19th century. And they find some gold, largely because, that's a very geologically active area, I would imagine. I'm going to be honest with you here. I don't know exactly how gold is formed. There's such a varied terrain in Washington, a lot going on. And then there's the added effect, which kind of drew me into it, was the fact that the whole Pacific Northwest is a absolute shit show of weirdness. And the people who generally live there, but also in the weird shit going on in the woods. The place is an absolute dumpster fire. It's a dumpster fire. It's like that meme of the dumpster floating down a flooded street and on fire.
My last episode.
But that is essentially the Pacific Northwest. Never go into the Pacific Northwest into the woods unless you're perfectly cool with never coming back, whether it be a bear, a mountain lion, or just
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot, or just the woods eating you. But yeah, so these guys find gold, go in, nobody hears from them. Some other people go out there, find something that may have something to do with decapitation. And then other people try to go out there some years later to mine the gold, which they also found and were excited about. And the history tends to repeat itself.
Is this the one that's along that river?
Yep.
Oh, okay. This will be a good one. All right.
Yeah, I love this one. And it perfectly exemplifies that. And it's perfect because it has both a human explanation and a non-human explanation. So you can really just have a ton of fun with it.
That's it for this episode of Bell Midnight. Next episode, we'll have the story of the forests and doubloons and decapitations.
Decap attack.
All right, until next time, lighters.
Bye-bye.